Welcome to Living Lent with My Saint, My Hero. My name's Amy D'Ambra, and I just am journeying with you, and I thank you for joining us. I thank you for wanting and craving holiness in such a way that you said yes to learning holy habits throughout this Lent. And today we're talking to my dear friend, Father Jim Bevacqua, pastor here at St. Bede's, and a diocesan priest, and a dear friend. And we're going to talk about one of those pillars of what we do during Lent, and that's fasting. And why are we doing this? As well as reflecting on even, in the Bible, it says, Matthew 4:1-11, at that time Jesus was led by the Spirit into the desert to be tempted by the devil, but he fasted for 40 days and 40 nights. And in Luke it says, just after his baptism, Jesus immediately was led by the Spirit into the wilderness where he fasted for 40 days. So as we're just listening to what Jesus did, and we learn we want those holy habits and we're craving holiness, we also learn from the saints, how did they incorporate habits of Jesus into their life? And how can we do that today? What are we called for today? Not just out of obedience and just do, but what will help to transform us to be more present in the presence of Jesus, to walk this earth in union with him as so many of the saints, and we're all called to be saints. So Father Jim Bevacqua, why don't you just help us understand why we're fasting, why are we called to fast, and some of the saints that might have fasted?
Well, I can't say that I'm an expert, but fasting, I think, has a lot of benefits. First of all, it helps us to identify with Jesus, who fasted for 40 days in the desert. I think that there are a lot of spiritual benefits because it helps us feel the hungry of those who are poor and hungry. It helps us to identify a little closer with them. It helps us to appreciate more the food that we do have and the blessings that we do have in our lives. But it's also just an opportunity to remember that, I'm a spiritual being. I am a spiritual being housed in a physical body, but this opportunity to fast, to and even abstain from food, is there to help me remember that I belong to Jesus. And this is something this is one of our big practices that we do during the season of Lent. And some people do this year round. Many of the people who follow, for example, the apparitions of Medjugorje, they fast on Fridays, some of them Wednesdays and Fridays, just bread and water. That is a request, a suggestion from the Blessed Mother herself, if you believe in the apparitions there, which have not yet been approved, but I'm a believer in them. I just had a personal experience that touched me there. But fasting is, it has a lot of spiritual benefits, and that's the primary role behind fasting. And one of the poster children of fasting, among others, is St. Catherine of Siena. St. Catherine, she took fasting to the extreme, reportedly only was fed on the Eucharist on some days, but she didn't eat a lot. She gave away food from the family dinner table. And I'm not saying that I'm suggesting that you don't eat at your family dinner. I'm just saying that that's kind of the extreme that she went to. And this is a woman who was a doctor of the church. She gave her heart and soul. She called the Pope to leave Avignon and go back to Rome to see the Vatican. So she's on a totally different level from me. But nonetheless, I think that she has some good things to say about fasting and the importance of that practice.
Yeah. And some of those are we are called to believe radically and to love radically and to do things. And also at other times during these different seasons of our lives, we kind of have to look at that. But I am just personally, I have been to Medjugorje many times as well, and fasted on bread and water on Wednesdays and Fridays. And a lot of times when I've noticed is when we're fasting, it gives us the time to kind of stop and recognize. Sometimes we are impulsive as humans, right? We're just impulsive. I'm hungry, I'm gonna pick this up, and you don't even realize sometimes and what I noticed with fasting was it stopped the tendency for impulse reaction and increased the tendency for intention. And that is like what I noticed was a very important habit from my prayer life. So even though fasting was the catalyst, it actually kind of blossomed into something more of how can I live my life a little bit more intentional? How can I, instead of just grabbing for that, that I have a nut, almonds on a jar in my counter, and I just grab them and just eat them at all times. And as I grab my hand, I was like, wait, I'm fasting. Okay, do I need that? Am I hungry right now? What am I craving in this moment? And just being intentional then kind of started to spill over to my prayer life, so that when I became anxious or worried, I started to go, wait, am I leaning into panic or am I leaning into prayer? So fasting was a physical extension of a habit I needed in my life of just pausing and taking a breath and being more intentional. Not about depletion, not about, I'm going to starve myself. More about, am I hungry in this moment, and what am I hungry for? And what am I going to lean into?
Well, one of the things I've noticed personally is that when fasting, it slows you down. You feel it in your body. And so you're reminded about that intentionality, but you're also given an opportunity to just step aside slightly from the whole rat race that so many of us live in, because we're just constantly moving and constantly have a gazillion things to do. And so it offers that opportunity as well.
Yeah, and I think there's probably some health benefits of slowing down a little bit as well, and actually appreciating. And that same thing is just food, the intake, right? And also blessing our food and the thanksgiving of it. Because there is that line, because one of the sins, right, is gluttony. Mm-hmm. And that's like this overindulgence. And I think that overindulgence sometimes, again, it might be a reaction, but and an impulse rather than an intention. So I don't know, I can't speak on that, but I just know that when I chose to fast, it slowed me down, and that's a beautiful thing.
And I think gluttony is one of the sins to avoid, which is why St. Catherine of Siena placed a heavy emphasis, I think, on fasting, was to avoid that deadly sin.
Yeah, well, thank you. Thank you so much for joining us again this week of Living Lent, and share with us what you're experiencing. Share with us how your Lent is going, and may we all be kind of inspired by St. Catherine of Siena, be inspired by Our Lady of Medjugorje. And Our Lady of Medjugorje, as Father Jim Vlachowicz said, she has asked us to fast on Wednesdays and Fridays on bread and water. And I did ask why when I was there. I said, why? And some of the visionaries just say this is the way that we live, and it helps us to be more prayerful. I thought, okay, that's what it is. Maybe that's simple enough. I know it's not very elaborate of a reason why, but sometimes you just, in your own heart when it's time to slow down, be a little bit more intentional, and ask for help as to how to be more holy. So thank you for joining us. Thank you, Father Jim, and we will see you next time.